Thank you very much. As you spoke about the challenges to speak, I think this is the most difficult hour after lunch to speak and to fight terrorism. But I hope that you resist also my presentation. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be the second time at an international conference of IDSA, and I'm very happy to be here. And thanks for the invitation, and I hope this is another occasion of cooperation between our two institutions. The subject of my presentation is are we nearer to a major CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear terrorism event and threat? And historically, already in 1995, upon his nomination, the then Secretary of Defense William Cohen declared that nuclear terrorism will be the major strategic threat to the United States in the 21st century. And we are already in this period. And at the same period, President Clinton, who read a book called The Cobra Event about science fiction bioterrorism attack, was very impressed and asked from his intelligence community to analyze the bioterrorist threat, and he also invested some $30 billion at that time in order to challenge the bioterrorist threat. This was on the background of what was considered the first real weapons of mass destruction chemical attack by the Aum Shinrikyo cult in March 95 in the Tokyo underground. Although, by the way, this was the second attack by the cult. The first one was more sophisticated a year before that, but still did not recognized as such by the Japanese and international community. Now this still did not, on this background, still the Bush administration, which came to the White House in January 2001, was surprised by the attacks of anthrax in October 2001, just days after the 9/11 attacks. Although these attacks were not weapons of mass destruction attack, but really a targeted attack against two congressmen and several American journalists. Still, the administration was very slow and did not exactly know how to respond to such an attack. A year before that, the evaluation was that will be 1 million victims, and still in the case of 5 victims, still was not preparation. Fortunately, since the chemical attacks by Aum Shinrikyo in 1995, then the anthrax letter attacks in October 2001, and some attacks in 2006, 2007 in Iraq by Al-Qaeda using chlorine. There was no real major attack since this period, and although these attacks, as I mentioned, were limited in scope and even in lethal effects, they still represent a kind of materialization of the threat that was perceived as such from the beginning of the early 1970s. Our institute prepared for our authorities major research about the CBRN threat before 9/11, and our conclusion at that time was that known terrorist organizations do not have the capability to build or acquire standard weapons of mass destruction. Even if they manage to produce and use simple, low-level, non-conventional weapons, the number of victims would be limited, several dozens or perhaps hundreds, as was the case in the sarin attack in Tokyo in 95. Still, it was clear that the impact, political, socio-economic, and psychological of such a limited attack would be strategic. Not the number of victims, but the modus operandi, the method of attack, would be strategic. However, our evaluation at that time did not address the case, which was quite possible, also known, that a country would provide the necessary agents or weapon to a terrorist organization. So what happened is that present events in the Greater Middle East and in Pakistan have raised the specter of a far greater present and danger. Prior to the outbreak of the fighting in Libya, it was known that the Gaddafi regime was thought to possess some 9+ metric tons of aging mustard agent and a larger quantity of chemical weapons precursor materials, which are serving to produce such agents. Libya's chemical agents were held in a concrete bunker several hundred miles to the south of Tripoli. They were known to the West, which made an agreement, by the way, on the nuclear issue with Libya. But after the fall of the Gaddafi regime, it became known that he kept secret some of his chemical weapons, which were not known to the intelligence services. So recently, in January, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons inspectors visited Libya, and among the chemical munitions they found were stocks of mustard agent. And the Libya's new rulers, they told the group that they found it after the fighting, and they promised to keep and to under control these agents. And Libya now has until 29th of April 2012 to submit a detailed plan and the date by which the destruction of the materials would be completed. So, however, no one is sure that such agents, especially chemical agents, will not arrive at the hands of terrorist groups, because we already know that the last months heavy weapons, anti-aerial missiles, anti-tank missiles have reached the hands of terrorists in the Gaza Strip, and some of them probably to the Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, the Akim organization, which is active in the Sahara region. The same could happen, by the way, with chemical and biological agents and even radiological weapons that the Syrian regime has in his arsenal. Already in May 2011, in an interview, Defense Secretary Robert Gates has warned about the possibility that Hezbollah is armed with more missiles and rockets than most states. They had 13,000 in 2006, now they have more than 40,000 missiles, but possibly, he said, Gates, armed with chemical or biological warheads. So, on the background of what happens in Syria, the loss of control and, in my opinion, the fall of the Bashar regime, the question is what will happen with those weapons, exactly with the worry about Libya. So, we don't know much about the biological arsenal, but we know for sure that there is a huge chemical arsenal in Syria. So, there is the possibility, and there is even some rumors that some of it is already passed to Hezbollah. Like in the past, Hezbollah gave to Hamas long-range ballistic missiles. According to a recent paper by a known analyst called Robert Litwak, a terrorist group could acquire a nuclear weapon either by the transfer of a weapon from a state or an unauthorized transfer or theft of a weapon from an inadequately secured site. So he considers two main states to be dangerous from this point of view. One is Russia, and the second is Pakistan. I am a bit, I don't agree completely with the Russian scenario, because we made also some researches in the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s, because Russia was considered the main threat of leakage of such material in even a bomb, nuclear bomb, after the fall of the communist empire, communist regime. But since then, the Russians have taken a lot of serious measures, including forming a special commando unit, and they made also some sting operation in order to dissuade, to deter the possible terrorist groups and also possible vendors of such agents. So, in my opinion, Pakistan is seen lately, and not only by me, by international officials and experts, as the main threat in this field. The United States, for instance, has implemented a $100 million program to secure Pakistan's nuclear laboratories and weapons by separating the warheads from the missiles. But still, United States officials remain concerned about foreign trained scientists who support radical Islamic causes infiltrating Pakistan's nuclear establishment, and more broadly about the remote but not unthinkable possibility of an acute regime-threatening political crisis, during which nuclear security is breached and the warhead falls into the hands of Islamic extremists. We know that prior to 9/11, at least two Pakistani scientists, nuclear scientists, met with bin Laden and with Zawahiri and spoke about the possibility to build some kind of nuclear weapons. What is very strange, these nuclear scientists gave to Zawahiri advice about how to build a biological weapon, and Zawahiri began the Al-Qaeda biological project at that time. By the way, a very failed, if you want, biological project. On the background of what happened with the operation to take and then to kill Osama bin Laden, and although the Chief of Staff Admiral Mullen has said that Pakistani intelligence and the army are not involved in the cover for the bin Laden's living in the compound in Abbottabad, still some very important United States officials, including the president himself, suspect that bin Laden relies perhaps on Pakistani assistance at mid-levels of the army or intelligence service. So there is a problem now, what happens to the nuclear facilities in Pakistan, and I'll give you a short list of worrying incidents in this field in the last 4 years. 8 people were killed in 2007 suicide bombing at a nuclear missile holding site south of the Pakistani capital. Suicide bombers in 2008 attacked entry points at Pakistan's Kamra air base, a suspected nuclear weapons holding site, and a war cantonment facility thought to be involved in putting nuclear weapons together. According to a British very known specialist, Gregory Shawn, lately, 2 high-profile attacks by terrorists on highly secure military bases in Pakistan. The first one on the general headquarters of the Pakistani army in Rawalpindi in October 2009. And the second one lately on the naval aviation base in Mehran near Karachi in May 2011 have renewed anxiety about the safety of Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. He noted that the last attack in 2011 was made by 2 gunmen involved in a strike, and they probably had inside information about the camp itself, and he evaluated, the British specialist, that the terrorists learned their tactics from the SSG, the Pakistan's army elite commandos, the special service group, which had trained earlier by the earlier generations of Pakistani and Kashmiri militants. According to another known specialist in nuclear affairs, David Albright, an attack on a Pakistani nuclear base would necessitate inside assistance to pass through base security, but also getting inside an underground bunker where there are the warheads. And he thought that a more likely scenario might be that militants or their sympathizers are able to divert nuclear material during the weapon production process without anyone also knowing. So it's a kind of surreptitious obtention of such materials by people inside and not an attack. In a September 2010 research paper from this institute, the IDSA, Christopher Clay argued, and I cite, that the risk to Pakistan's arsenal has been exaggerated, but this conclusion should not lead to complacency. The risks to Pakistan's arsenal are still unacceptably high, even Pakistan has done much to combat them. So this is, I understand, some kind of Indian evaluation. India is preparing itself for such a scenario, and according to the Times of India, on December the 15th, 2011, India prepares itself to cope with the Pakistani threat. Crisis management teams throughout India are to receive training in handling a disaster involving chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear materials. A training facility is to be set up in Nagpur, and property has also been set aside in each Indian state for the construction of CBRN disaster response teams. However, the NDMA vice president, which is responsible for this preparation, said there is very little knowledge in the public domain on dealing with radiation exposure. By the way, very few countries have such knowledge, and when there were the the Olympics in Athens in 2004, the NATO was the main supporter for defense on nuclear attacks in case of a nuclear attack on the Olympics, and in the case of the Beijing Olympics in 2008, it was the United States special forces that were involved in defending the Olympics against the nuclear threat. So, in light of the revolutionary events and the growing instability in much of the Greater Middle East and South Asia, and the growing threat of failing states losing control of their chemical, biological, and nuclear assets, an international effort, in my opinion, is needed to monitor, to control, and foil CBRN terrorist attacks, and it is vital for the security of the international community. So, as the Pakistani threat, as I said, it seems me is very, very close here. I hope that during the discussion we'll hear some from the Indian experts here. What do you think we should do? And I mean not only India but the international community, in order to try to prevent it, because in my opinion the threat from nuclear terrorism from Pakistan is much greater than the threat of nuclear terrorism from Iran. Iran is a problem for my country as a nuclear power in the future, near future probably, but not on the issue of nuclear terrorism, because they are controlling very well their assets. So thank you for the attention.